Uh, hurting the brand hurts the economy. It's a slow process, but it happens. It takes some time, but it's happening. Let me give a few examples of how this is happening. I'll start with a couple of companies, huge companies, and show you how that is affecting the Israeli economy. And in fact, you don't need to hear it from a BDS activist. Yesterday, the Israeli Minister of the Economy, Yair Lapid, said that soon enough, if we don't do something drastic with the Palestinian so-called peace process, every one of us will hurt in their pockets because of the growing boycott. Now, he's a conservative, supposedly centrist politician, and that's what he's saying. Tzipi Livni, the so-called Minister of Justice, although she's accused of war crimes, herself said that the boycott movement is expanding uniformly and exponentially. Those are her terms, exponentially. And she must be the smartest person in the Israeli government, I think. The rest are very low IQ, but anyway. So for Livni, Lapid, and others to start feeling the heat, this means the Israeli establishment recognizes that this is affecting the economy. They see that, but they won't admit numbers. They won't give us the privilege of knowing how exactly it's impacting them. So a couple of companies I want to mention. G4S. G4S is a Danish-British company. It's the largest security company in the world. It's involved in the privatization of prisons here, the wall with Mexico, many nasty projects in this country, which makes it a possibility to connect with other struggles in this country, black communities, Latinos, Chicanos, and so on. In the occupied territories and Israel, G4S is involved in providing services to Israeli prisons, where Palestinian political prisoners are tortured, including child prisoners, providing systems to the settlements, security systems to the settlements, and to checkpoints. So it's deeply complicit in violations of international law. We've started a campaign against G4S in 2011, I mean, just a couple of years ago, really. And they already lost the European Parliament contract, security contract. More importantly, they started to lose contracts in universities across Europe, especially in the UK and Norway. And I want to focus on Norway a bit. They lost two contracts in Norway, the Oslo University and Bergen University. Bergen is a prestigious Norwegian university. Bergen is a particular case that we have to focus on because it opened a tender for the security contract for the university, and G4S's bid was the best, the lowest price. They have the experience and they knew what would be the best price. So they almost won. But the administration of Bergen University added to G4S's bid a certain amount of money, which they considered reputational damage. They argued that if Bergen hires G4S, they will lose their reputation, which means losing funding, faculty, students, and so on. And they evaluated that in dollar amounts and added it to G4S's bid, so they came out the worst, and they lost the bid. G4S threatened to sue Bergen University, but eventually they simply got out of the Norwegian market altogether. They sold their entire operation in Norway. So that's one example. The CEO, the administration of G4S in 2012, 2013 started sending very strong messages that they feel the heat. In fact, in an interview with the Financial Times, leaders in G4S said, we are feeling the reputational risk of the boycott movement against us. It's becoming a real reputational damage to us, and this means revenue. So we'll start phasing out of Israeli operations in the occupied territories by 2015. We don't trust corporations. They're addicted liars. But the fact that their executives have to come out and say, give us this, surrendering to us this admission that, yes, we're feeling your heat and we want to step out of part of what we're doing wrong with the Israeli projects, says a lot. This is not a tiny company. This is a 650,000 employee company, huge, enormous company. So it's already feeling the BDS heat. Another company is Viola. a French company involved in the so-called Jerusalem Light Rail, which connects the colonies, illegal colonies in the occupied territories with the city of Jerusalem. And it has at least 2 other projects that violate international in the occupied territories. We've started the campaign against Viola since November 2008, so just about 5 years ago. Until now, Viola lost more than $20 billion worth of contracts around the world. And just last week, it was announced that they lost a huge contract in Boston, Massachusetts, worth $4.25 billion. Now, we cannot claim that it was only BDS activism that led to that, but certainly BDS activism played a key role because our partners in Boston, a very large human rights coalition, has been campaigning for 2.5 years against Viola, and they lost that contract. So companies started to feel the heat from BDS. Increasingly in the financial world, BDS is being viewed as a reputational risk, and in fact, some financial investors now require that corporations have to disclose whether they're subject to BDS campaigns or not to their investors, because it's considered a reputational risk. So you have to say, for full disclosure, whether you're being attacked by a BDS campaign. So we are now considered a real threat to those complicit companies in the financial world. I mean, the professional financial world, not activism world. And that's a very huge development for BDS. So the impact is happening. And Israel is admitting it more openly. I mentioned Livni and Lapid, but the most important indicator of this impact is June of 2013. The Israeli government, Netanyahu specifically, the prime minister, shifted overall responsibility for fighting BDS from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which handled BDS since 2005, to the Ministry of Strategic Affairs. This is unprecedented. This never happened before. So we don't quite grasp what it means. What does it mean that the Ministry of Strategic Affairs in Israel will fight this non-violent civil society movement? We don't know what that means. We're honored, but we don't know what it means. But the Ministry of Strategic Affairs handles the big issues. The Iranian so-called nuclear threat, the strategic relationship with the United States, those most important existential issues for Israel. Now BDS is considered one of them, a serious strategic threat to its regime of oppression. Now, I want to also mention the challenges, because it hasn't been a rosy, sweet ride. No, we've had quite some challenges, and I guess I don't need to tell you in the US how difficult it has been, and it will continue to be. But one thing is for sure. While BDS against Israel remains controversial in the United States, I can tell you confidently, it's no longer taboo. What Edward Said called the last taboo in American politics, which is criticizing Israel or suggesting measures against it, God forbid, has been shattered in 2013. Today, it's okay to debate. It's extremely controversial, but it's not taboo. Today, it's okay to debate whether to boycott Israel or not on the front pages of the New York Times. Unprecedented. This would not have happened a year ago, let alone 5 years. A year ago, this would not have happened. Today, the New York Times regularly covers the BDS. Very biased. It's the New York Times, of course. But still, you get some news about this movement and where it's going. So some of the challenges have been accusing the movement of anti-Semitism. The ready charge always used against any kind of human rights movement that holds Israel to account, to its obligations under international law. I would say, with the exception of the US until recently, this has not been a very effective tool of intimidation. The lobby Israel and its lobby groups have overused it way too frequently, that it lost any meaning. When very important Jewish intellectuals are called anti-Semitic, not even self-hating, anti-Semitic, what does that mean? When humanists like Desmond Tutu are called anti-Semitic, what does it mean any longer? So if an anti-Semite comes and hits you on the head, you cannot recognize him, because everyone is anti-Semitic, it seems, except the extreme right Zionists, the only ones who are not. So it lost its meaning. They've cheapened anti-Semitism. They've really cheapened the term. There is anti-Semitism out there, but don't look on a human rights-based movement that opposes all forms of racism to see anti-Semitism, because we don't have it in our ranks. We're a human rights movement that insists that absolutely zero tolerance for racism, including anti-Semitism, in the movement. Another reason why it has not succeeded, this intimidation tactic, is that there are many Jewish activists in the BDS movement. When I went to school in New York, I finished my master's in '87. Almost every single Jewish student on my campus, Columbia University, was a Zionist. I mean, you couldn't find Jewish students who were not Zionist. Very rare. Our allies, all three of them, very, very, very rare. Today, it has changed drastically. I regularly speak on college campuses, from the smallest community college to the Harvards and Columbias and Princetons and Berkeleys, and it has changed drastically. In SJP groups, in Palestine solidarity groups, there's a disproportionately high number of Jewish activists. It has completely changed. And Israel's realizing that. It's losing the hearts and minds, not just of the world, but of an entire Jewish generation. The younger Jewish Americans are no longer blindly, dogmatically following Israel right or wrong. That era is gone for young Jewish Americans. Statistics actually is proving that. And let's not underestimate the power of that shift, the significance of that shift. Another thing about the anti-Semitism charge, and I've said that several times before, and I'll repeat it, just the accusation that boycotting Israel is anti-Semitic is an anti-Semitic accusation. Because it assumes that Israel and world Jewry, all the Jews around the world, are one and the same. And that Israel represents them and speaks for all the Jews. Anyone who puts all Jews in one basket is an anti-Semite. Who essentializes all Jews, reduces them to one entity. So it doesn't matter if you say all Jews are smart or all Jews are dumb, it's the same anti-Semitism. Because there is no all Jews. Any human group has diversity. If you strip world Jewry of diversity, you are making an anti-Semitic statement. So anyone who says boycotting Israel is anti-Semitic is making an anti-Semitic statement, and we should hold them accountable to that. Another challenge that Israel and its lobby groups has tried is the bullying and intimidation, trying to smear, to fabricate, to intimidate, to make it really, really difficult for any kind of established elected official, any church leader, any union leader to call for BDS. They wanted to raise the price so high with personal vilification and attacks to teach a lesson to everyone else. Don't even go there, because the price is so steep, it's not even worth it. It worked to an extent in some places, especially the US, but that's so 2 years ago. It changed in 2013. I mean, really, it changed drastically in 2013. I didn't imagine in 2012 that I'll stand here 2014 saying that we've crossed that line. We're already into a different phase, where, as I said, it's still extremely difficult, but this immediate automatic vilification impact is really being undermined. It no longer shuts up everyone. It still has a lot of power. You still silence a lot of politicians. Many people in positions of power in this country are afraid to speak up, and are afraid to say even that they support Palestinian rights when they know deep inside that they do. But they would lose their jobs. That's still very much a reality. But it's being challenged very effectively. In academia, in churches, in Jewish groups, everywhere. It's being challenged. And Jewish Voice for Peace is playing a very important role with the Jewish community's change. Today, no one can claim there's a monopoly on Jewish representation, on Jewish views in this country. AIPAC and the Federation of Jewish whatever, this big lobby conglomerate, cannot monopolize Jewish voices in this country. There's a diversity of voices. And I think JVP has played a very important role in giving this diversity.